The moment a man hurts you, the most powerful response is not revenge, it's controlled confusion. It is the calm, disciplined retreat that makes him question everything he thought he understood about you. Most people lash out, explode, demand answers, and drown themselves in emotional chaos. But you don't. You take a step back, not out of weakness, but out of mastery. You don't play his game, you reset the board. Because when a man expects you to crumble, your composure becomes the loudest disruption he will ever face. Confusion is not created through mind games, it is created through self-control. And that is a level of strength most people never develop. When a man hurts you, he expects your reaction to validate his behavior. He expects anger, chasing, explanations, endless questions, because as long as you react, he still holds power. But when you choose silence, reflection, and direction, you shatter his assumptions. You send a message. My value is not negotiable, and you do not dictate my emotional state. That message hits harder than any argument. That message forces him to sit with the consequences of his choices. Your lack of reaction becomes the mirror he never wanted to look into. Because now he has to confront the truth. You are not controlled by him. You are controlled by your principles. A disciplined woman doesn't confuse a man through manipulation. She confuses him through growth. She uses the hurt as data, not as destruction. She studies his actions, not his excuses. She refuses to interpret chaos as affection. And that shift in mindset creates a storm inside him. He wonders why you're not begging. He wonders why you're not fighting. He wonders why you're not trying to convince him of your worth. And that confusion is powerful because it's rooted in your evolution, not his validation. When you stop trying to fix what someone broke, they are forced to face the damage themselves. Distance becomes your strategy, not your escape. When you step back and choose to prioritize your mental clarity over emotional impulsiveness, you reclaim leverage. You confuse him because you stop participating in his patterns. You stop responding to inconsistency. You stop tolerating disrespect. And suddenly, he realizes he no longer has access to the version of you he took for granted. Your silence isn't a punishment, it's a boundary. Your distance isn't a threat, it's a declaration. And that declaration shakes him because it exposes the gap between what he expected and who you truly are. Confusing a man who hurt you is not about creating chaos, it's about creating contrast. The contrast between the woman he thought he could toy with and the woman who now moves with purpose. The contrast between emotional reactivity and emotional maturity. The contrast between giving everything and giving nothing. A man is confused when he cannot predict you anymore. He is destabilized when your energy no longer flows toward him. He is forced to reevaluate his choices when you are no longer available for his excuses. That shift is the turning point. You confuse him most powerfully when you focus on yourself. You build, you heal, you grow, you redirect your attention toward your goals, your work, your purpose. You stop centering your life around his presence or his absence. And that independence disrupts his comfort. Because the moment you place your energy into your own life, you rise above the situation. And rising is the greatest confusion of all, because he expected you to fall. The truth is simple. Hurt is inevitable, but humiliation is optional. You cannot control what someone does to you, but you can control what you do next. And your next step determines your power. A controlled, disciplined, self-respecting response turns emotional pain into psychological leverage. It turns heartbreak into awakening. It turns disappointment into elevation. This is how you confuse a man who thought he broke you. You show him he only refined you. When you walk away with dignity, he questions his intelligence. When you speak with clarity instead of begging for answers, he questions his choices. When you stop fighting for someone who isn't fighting for you, he questions his value. And when you rise instead of reacting, he questions everything. That is confusion. That is strength. That is the moment the balance of power shifts. So when a man hurts you, don't collapse, Don't chase. Don't explain your worth to someone who failed to see it. Instead, pull back, stand tall, rebuild yourself. Let the silence do what words never could. Let your growth expose what his behavior never justified. Because the greatest confusion you can create is living a life he no longer has access to, a life where your happiness is no longer negotiable. Emotional composure is the silence that exposes every hidden intention. Because once you stop reacting, manipulation loses its grip. The moment you learn to hold your ground, to breathe before you respond, to observe instead of absorb, you dismantle the entire power structure that someone tries to build over you. People manipulate through urgency, pressure, confusion, emotional spikes, and forced reactions. But composure interrupts all of it. Calmness is not passive, it is a higher form of intelligence. It gives you time to see the truth. It gives you the ability to separate what you feel from what is actually happening. And in that gap between stimulus and response, you discover the power most people never master, the ability to choose your reaction instead of surrendering it. Manipulators feed on emotional chaos. They need you overwhelmed. They need you uncertain. They need you acting before thinking. Because the moment you lose composure, they gain control. That is why emotional stability is your shield. When you remain calm, the manipulator doesn't know what to do. They cannot predict you. They cannot provoke you. They cannot twist your words or your reactions. Suddenly, their tactics lose impact. Their patterns fall flat. Their confidence cracks. Not because you fought harder, but because you refused to give them the reaction they were counting on. Composure breaks the psychological rhythm they depend on. A composed person sees through the fog. Instead of drowning in emotion, you step outside it. You watch the situation unfold like a movie. You notice the patterns, the inconsistencies, the exaggerations, the guilt trips. Manipulation becomes obvious when you're no longer rushed. And once you see the game, you stop playing it. This is what confuses the manipulator. They can't understand how their usual tactics suddenly stop working. They wonder why you're not apologizing for things you didn't do. They wonder why their emotional outbursts no longer move you. They wonder why their silence doesn't scare you anymore. Your composure exposes their strategy without you saying a single word. Emotional composure is not suppression. It is strength. It is the discipline to respond from clarity rather than chaos. It is the ability to sit with discomfort without collapsing. It is the wisdom to pause before reacting. It is the maturity to let people reveal themselves without trying to control or correct them. And most importantly, it is the realization that your emotional state should never be placed in someone else's hands. When you stop allowing people to pull your strings, they lose access to your inner world. And that boundary is what ends manipulation before it begins. The reason composure is so powerful is because it forces accountability. When you stop reacting emotionally, people have to confront their own behavior. They can't hide behind your outburst. They can't deflect blame onto your reaction. They can't twist the narrative. Your calmness becomes a mirror that reflects their actions back at them. And most manipulators cannot stand what they see. They crumble under the weight of their own words when there's no distraction to lean on. This is why silence, patience, and emotional discipline are not passive traits, they are psychological weapons. Composure also protects your dignity. Emotional manipulation pushes you toward actions you later regret. It tries to drag you into arguments, force decisions, or make you feel responsible for someone else's emotions. But when you hold your composure, you protect your values, your self-image, and your long-term peace. You rise above the emotional traps because you're not operating from panic, you're operating from principle. Instead of reacting blindly, you respond intentionally. Instead of absorbing negativity, you filter it. Instead of matching someone's chaos, you elevate above it. In relationships, composure redefines the dynamic. It communicates something very powerful. I will not be moved by pressure, guilt, or fear. This forces the other person to either step up with honesty or expose their dysfunction. And both outcomes benefit you. Either they show you they can grow, or they show you they cannot stay in your life. Composure protects you from falling into the illusions people create. It helps you recognize when someone is pulling strings instead of speaking truth. And once you recognize manipulation, you take back the power they tried to steal. The strongest people are not the loudest. They are not the ones who react first. They are the ones who stay grounded when others lose control. They lead with discipline, not impulse. They listen more than they speak. They observe more than they assume. They know that composure is not weakness, it's emotional sovereignty. It is the quiet declaration that you are in charge of yourself. And nothing, no person, no pressure, no emotional storm can shake someone who controls their inner world. So remember, emotional composure disarms manipulation because it protects your clarity, your boundaries, and your self-respect. It keeps your power where it belongs, with you. When you stay composed, you see people for who they are, not who they pretend to be. You respond from your values, not your wounds. You make decisions that serve your future, not your fear. And most importantly, you break the cycle of manipulation by refusing to play the emotional game. Composure is not the absence of feeling, it is the mastery of it. And that mastery is what sets you free. Boundaries create psychological disruption because they expose who respects you and who only benefits from your lack of limits. The moment you draw a line, anyone who was using you, draining you, or depending on your silence feels threatened. That reaction reveals everything. Boundaries are not walls, they are clarity. They are the structure that protects your self-respect, your time, your energy, and your emotional well-being. And when you introduce clarity into a space where people were accustomed to your confusion, it shakes them. It disrupts the psychological patterns they once controlled. A boundary is not just a rule, it is a shift in power. It is the moment you stop being available for disrespect, inconsistency, and emotional manipulation. It is the moment people must either rise to meet your standards or fall away because they never intended to. A boundary forces people to confront themselves. It interrupts habits they relied on. If someone was used to you always saying yes, your no disrupts their comfort. If they were used to you tolerating disrespect, your silence disrupts their entitlement. If they were used to you carrying the emotional weight of the relationship, your refusal disrupts their selfishness. Boundaries make people uncomfortable not because you are wrong, but because they can no longer benefit from your lack of self-protection. That discomfort is a psychological disruption, one that reveals their true intentions faster than any argument ever could. People who care adjust. People who don't resist. And that simple truth is why boundaries are one of the most powerful tools you will ever develop. Boundaries also disrupt your own patterns. They challenge the part of you that settled, tolerated, ignored red flags, or tried to earn love through overgiving. When you set a boundary, you interrupt your own emotional autopilot. You force yourself to operate from standards rather than survival. You stop trying to please everyone and start choosing yourself. That internal disruption is uncomfortable at first because it requires self-respect, discipline, and courage. But it is also liberating. You begin to see that boundaries are not just about keeping harmful people out, they are about keeping the best version of you intact. They restore your inner balance, your confidence, and your sense of control. Psychologically, boundaries create a shift in dynamics. They introduce accountability, and accountability exposes character. When someone respects your boundary, they show emotional maturity. They show effort. They show they value you enough to adjust. But when someone mocks, argues, guilt trips, or punishes you for having boundaries, they reveal that they were never interested in a healthy relationship. They were interested in access. Access to your time, your emotions, your loyalty, your resources. The moment you restrict that access, they react. And their reaction is the evidence you needed all along. Boundaries also disrupt manipulation. Manipulators rely on your fear of conflict, your desire for approval, your emotional sensitivity, or your hope that things will change. But boundaries remove their leverage. When you say, "This behavior is unacceptable," you take away their ability to twist your emotions. When you stop explaining yourself repeatedly, you take away their ability to drain you. When you walk away from disrespect instead of begging for decency, you take away their ability to control you. Manipulation requires reaction. Boundaries require discipline, and discipline always wins. Most people underestimate how powerful a simple boundary can be. A boundary is not loud, it's firm. It doesn't require yelling, it requires commitment. It doesn't demand respect, it commands it through consistency. When you enforce a boundary, you send a message. My peace is not optional. My worth is not negotiable. My presence is not guaranteed unless I'm valued. That message disrupts any relationship built on imbalance. It forces people to reevaluate how they show up. It forces them to either grow or leave, and both outcomes protect you. Boundaries don't push the right people away, they push the wrong people out. Healthy individuals respect limits because they have them too. They know that boundaries are a sign of self-respect, not selfishness. They know that a relationship without boundaries is a relationship without direction. They know that love without limits becomes sacrifice without return. So when you set boundaries, the right people feel safer, not rejected. They feel clarity, not confusion. They feel motivated, not threatened. That is the beauty of boundaries. They filter without you having to force anything. The deepest psychological disruption boundaries create is this: they change the narrative of your life. You stop being someone who tolerates and start being someone who chooses. You stop being reactive and become intentional. You stop waiting for people to treat you better and start requiring it. You move from emotional dependence to emotional sovereignty. And once you taste that power, you never go back. So understand this clearly. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about controlling what you allow into your world. They are not about punishment. They are about protection. They are not about being hard. They are about being wise. And the moment you honor your boundaries, you honor yourself. That honor disrupts every unhealthy dynamic you were once trapped in. It rewrites your relationships. It rebuilds your confidence. It restores your identity. Boundaries don't just change how people treat you, they change how you treat yourself. And that is the disruption that transforms your life forever. Self-respect confuses anyone who counted on your dependence, because the moment you choose yourself, their control dies. People who rely on your weakness, your fear of loss, your emotional attachment, or your constant availability do not know what to do when you suddenly rise. They built their comfort on the assumption that you would remain small, forgiving, and predictable. So when you begin to enforce standards, protect your peace, and put your needs first, it shakes them at their core. You transform from someone they believed they could influence to someone they no longer recognize. Self-respect changes the entire power dynamic, not through confrontation, but through elevation. You stop operating from fear and start operating from value. And nothing creates psychological disruption faster than a person who refuses to be controlled anymore. People who expected your dependence counted on your silence. They counted on your willingness to carry the emotional weight. They counted on your habit of accepting excuses, tolerating disrespect, and prioritizing them over yourself. But when you choose self-respect, you break the pattern they thrived on. You stop explaining yourself, and they lose the ability to guilt trip you. You stop chasing, and they lose the illusion of their importance. You stop tolerating inconsistency, and they lose the comfort of being lazy with your heart. Your self-respect exposes how much they relied on your lack of it. And that exposure hits them harder than any argument ever could. Self-respect is not loud or aggressive. It is a calm shift in posture. It's the moment when you say, I will not shrink myself to earn a place in someone's life. It's the decision to walk away from confusion, dishonesty, or emotional chaos without needing closure. This level of strength confuses people because they expected your fear of losing them to keep you compliant. They never expected you to realize that the real danger was losing yourself. When you choose peace over drama, dignity over desperation, standards over attachment, you show them that the person they thought they controlled was only a temporary version of you. The real you was waiting behind the boundary, behind the healing, behind the self-respect you hadn't stepped into yet. Self-respect disrupts relationships built on imbalance. When someone depends on your dependence, they see your growth as rebellion. They see your healing as disrespect. They see your boundaries as punishment. But that is because they were never invested in your strength. They were invested in your weakness. They needed you to need them. They needed you to remain insecure enough to accept the bare minimum. They needed you to believe that their presence was a privilege you had to earn. But self-respect rewrites the truth. It reminds you that your worth is inherent, not granted. It reminds you that love is mutual, not one-sided. It reminds you that respect is a requirement, not a reward. And when you finally act like someone who deserves better, anyone who wanted you small will react with confusion, irritation, or panic. This confusion is a psychological shift. When you elevate your standards, people who were comfortable beneath them must either rise or leave. And many leave, because rising requires effort, honesty, maturity, and accountability qualities they avoided while you lived in dependence. Your growth exposes their stagnation. Your clarity exposes their games. Your confidence exposes their insecurities. Self-respect forces people to show who they truly are. Some will meet your evolution with admiration and effort. Others will fight it with resistance and manipulation. Both responses reveal their character, not your worth. The beauty of self-respect is that it doesn't require revenge, anger, or dramatic exits. It simply requires discipline. You stop arguing about how you deserve to be treated and start acting like it. You stop begging for love and start allowing love to flow where it is reciprocated. You stop investing in people who only invest in your dependence. That shift creates an emotional and psychological disruption because it removes the power imbalance they relied on. Suddenly, they cannot lure you back with mixed signals. They cannot confuse you with temporary affection. They cannot control you with silence or guilt. You have outgrown the version of yourself they could manipulate. Self-respect is the beginning of emotional freedom. It allows you to see clearly who values you, who uses you, who grows with you, and who tries to hold you back. It realigns your choices. It strengthens your intuition. It protects your heart from repeating past wounds. When you respect yourself, you stop negotiating with disrespect. You stop staying where you are not valued. You stop accepting half love, half effort, half presence. And the moment you stop settling, you start rising. The confusion your self-respect creates is simply the echo of your evolution. People who expected you to stay dependent are forced to face the loss of the version of you that served their comfort. But you are not responsible for their discomfort. You are responsible for your growth. Your self-respect is not a weapon. It is a shield. It is not arrogance. It is alignment. It is not selfishness. It is self-preservation. And anyone who interprets your self-respect as a threat was benefiting from your lack of it. So stand tall, be firm, choose yourself. Because the moment you fully step into your worth, you stop confusing yourself and you start confusing everyone who assumed you never would. Your silence is not passive, it is strategic power. Because the absence of reaction forces truth to surface and exposes intentions that words could never reveal. Most people mistake silence for weakness, for indecision, or for surrender. But in reality, it is the most potent weapon you possess. Silence creates a space where others must confront themselves, where their motives are revealed, and where the illusions they've constructed around your attention and energy collapse. When someone expects a reaction and receives none, their assumptions are shattered. They are forced into a mirror they never intended to look into. Strategic silence is not about avoidance. It is about clarity, control, and elevation. It allows you to observe, to measure, and to respond only when it serves your purpose, not theirs. In a world that rewards noise and reaction, the quiet individual becomes untouchable, unpredictable, and incomparably powerful. Silence interrupts the patterns of manipulation. People manipulate through words, pressure, guilt, and emotional turbulence. They provoke reactions because every reaction reinforces their control. But when you withdraw verbal fuel, when you refuse to engage in the drama or justify your worth, their influence diminishes. The manipulators, the attention seekers, the controllers, they rely on your participation. Without it, their games collapse. They panic because they no longer understand how to interact with you. They feel exposed, unsettled, and confused. Your silence creates an internal crisis for them, one that words could never accomplish. And in that confusion, you regain power because your inner world remains untouched by their chaos. Silence also forces self-reflection. When you stop reacting impulsively, when you choose observation over engagement, people see the consequences of their behavior in the stillness. Without your commentary, without your defense, without your explanation, the truth of their actions cannot be hidden. They must reckon with it internally, because there is no external distraction to absolve them. Your silence compels accountability, not through confrontation, but through presence, or rather, the absence of it. It is a disruption of expectation, and disruption breeds awareness. When you speak only with precision and purpose, your words carry far more weight than constant noise ever could. Silence sharpens perception, both yours and theirs. Strategic silence is also an act of self-preservation. Engaging in every argument, clarifying every misunderstanding, or responding to every insult drains energy and dilutes authority. Silence allows you to conserve your resources, to think clearly, and to act intentionally. It positions you above petty conflicts, emotional manipulation, and reactive chaos. Those who try to provoke you are frustrated by their inability to draw you out because they are met with a calmness they cannot manipulate. Silence makes you untouchable because it communicates confidence without assertion. It communicates that your peace is non-negotiable. It communicates that your focus is on matters of significance, not the trivial games others attempt to play. The psychological disruption created by silence is profound. Most people expect reactions. They are conditioned to measure engagement as validation. When you withdraw, they are forced to confront the reality that your presence, attention, or agreement is not guaranteed. They are confronted with the autonomy they tried to undermine. Your silence demands that they evaluate their behavior, because the absence of chaos leaves only truth, and truth, once reflected without distraction, is impossible to ignore. In relationships, at work, or in social dynamics, this quiet assertion of power recalibrates expectations, shifts influence, and redefines respect. Silence does not mean emotional detachment or apathy. It is active in its intent, disciplined in its execution, and deliberate in its consequence. It allows observation of character without contamination by opinion or reaction. It protects your mental clarity while challenging the mental maps of others. The absence of words becomes a form of communication that transcends argument, persuasion, and negotiation. People who thought they could manipulate your emotions, control your decisions, or predict your responses now face the impossible. They must navigate a presence that is independent, self-contained, and unshakable. That is strategic power. Your silence also communicates boundaries without confrontation. It says, I will not engage with disrespect. I will not tolerate manipulation. I will not sacrifice my peace for someone else's chaos. Those words are unnecessary because the quiet demonstrates them. When you stop justifying yourself, explaining your decisions, or proving your worth, the people around you are forced to recognize that their assumptions about access, control, and influence were false. Silence transforms invisibility into authority and absence into influence. You become a measure of consequence because your energy, attention, and presence are no longer disposable or predictable. Ultimately, silence is a declaration of self-respect and self-mastery. It communicates that you are governed by principles, not impulses, that you act from awareness, not reaction, that you prioritize growth, focus, and clarity over validation, drama, and emotional entanglement. People are confused, unsettled, or even intimidated because they have never experienced a presence that holds so much power in stillness. Strategic silence disrupts patterns, reestablishes authority, and exposes truth. And once you understand it, once you wield it consciously, you will never see quiet as empty or passive again. It becomes your strongest form of influence. So embrace silence as power. Let it shape perception, shift dynamics, and force accountability. Let it protect your energy and preserve your peace. Let it disrupt expectations and expose intentions. Your silence is not absence, it is presence. Not weakness, but mastery. Not surrender, but command. And in mastering silence, you master the environment, the people around you, and ultimately yourself.